Your mind can be a palace, full of ideas, creativity, and solutions. But sometimes that very same mind can turn into a prison. The walls? Thoughts that won't stop looping. The chains? Questions with no answers. And the jailer? You unknowingly keeping yourself locked inside. Overthinking feels like replaying the same movie on repeat, except each time you hope for a different ending. You lie awake at night, analyzing the words you said in a conversation earlier that day. Did they misunderstand you? Did you sound stupid? Or maybe you should have stayed quiet. The scene replays endlessly, and instead of clarity, you're left with exhaustion. But here's the truth. Overthinking isn't just thinking too much. It's mistaking activity for progress. Your brain believes that if it keeps spinning, it will somehow stumble upon the perfect solution. But in reality, it only digs the hole deeper. Imagine a hamster running on a wheel. It's moving fast, using up energy, heart racing, but it's not actually going anywhere. Overthinking works the same way. It creates an illusion of productivity, that you're working through the problem. But instead of progress, you're stuck in place, trapped by your own thoughts. This mental cage is dangerous because it feels safe. Your mind convinces you that sitting and analyzing every possible outcome will protect you from mistakes, rejection, or embarrassment. But ironically, the more you overthink, the less you actually live. Opportunities pass by while you're busy weighing every possibility. Conversations are missed because you're rehearsing what to say instead of saying it. Life shrinks because fear expands. Psychologists often describe overthinking as a form of avoidance. Instead of facing reality, we retreat into thought, because thoughts feel controllable. But reality is messy, unpredictable, and scary. Overthinking gives us a false sense of control, like holding a flashlight in a dark cave but refusing to take a single step forward. And the worst part? Overthinking doesn't just drain your energy, it creates stress where none existed. You begin to feel trapped, restless, and even resentful of your own mind. That's why it feels like a prison. You're confined within invisible bars made of your own thoughts, unable to walk freely into the present moment. But here's the good news. The first step to escaping this prison is simply seeing it for what it is. To recognize that these walls aren't real. They're built from illusions of what-ifs and maybes. Once you see the cage clearly, you're no longer just a prisoner, you become someone holding the key. And that leads us into the deeper question. Why does the brain even build this prison in the first place? To understand that, we have to step into the psychology of endless loops. So why does the brain trap itself in these thought cycles? Why do we replay conversations, decisions, and what-ifs like a broken record? The answer lies in the psychology of mental loops, a survival mechanism that has overstayed its welcome in our modern lives. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors needed to be hyper-alert to survive. If they saw a rustling in the bushes, they couldn't just ignore it. It could be a predator. Their minds had to analyze every possibility. Was it the wind, a rabbit, or a lion waiting to strike? Thinking, rethinking, and scanning for danger gave them an evolutionary advantage. Those who worried more often survived longer. Fast forward to today, and our brains are still running on that ancient software. The problem? The dangers have changed. The lion has been replaced by an awkward text message, a work deadline, or the fear of rejection. But the brain doesn't know the difference. It still activates the same old survival system, treating small daily uncertainties like life or death threats. Psychologists call this rumination. It's the habit of mentally chewing on a problem over and over without reaching a solution. Research shows that rumination is closely linked to anxiety and depression because the brain gets stuck in a feedback loop. The more you think, the more anxious you feel. The more anxious you feel, the more you think. It's like being caught in quicksand. The harder you struggle to get free, the deeper you sink. The brain believes that analyzing will help, but instead, it just tightens the loop. Let's make it relatable. Think about the last time you sent a risky text, maybe confessing feelings or apologizing or asking for something important. Minutes pass. No reply. Your brain immediately starts constructing scenarios. They're ignoring me. They're angry. Maybe they're telling others what I said. Did I ruin everything? Hours later, you've built an entire story in your head. One that's often far worse than reality. That's the loop in action. Thought, more worry. Another reason these loops form is because the brain is addicted to completion. Psychologists describe something called the Zeigarnik effect. Our minds naturally cling to unfinished tasks and unresolved questions. That's why cliffhangers in TV shows keep you hooked, and why your brain won't let go of a decision until it feels fully closed. Overthinking is your brain's desperate attempt to finish the story. But here's the paradox. Most life questions don't have neat endings. Was that choice the best one? Will they like you? Will things turn out okay? You can't know for sure. The brain keeps looping because it's searching for certainty in a world that rarely offers it. And this is why overthinking feels endless. It's not because you're weak or flawed. It's because your brain is running a survival program in a world where it no longer fits. So, if the brain confuses thinking with safety, what happens when it also confuses thinking with solving? That's the next key to unlocking the prison. Here's a simple truth. Your brain loves to trick you. One of its greatest illusions is convincing you that thinking equals solving. That if you just keep running the same problem through your head, eventually you'll crack the code. But in reality, overthinking is often just spinning the wheels without moving the car. Think of it like standing at a whiteboard, writing down the same equation over and over, hoping the answer will magically appear. The act of writing feels like progress, but unless you change the approach, you're just repeating the same mistake. Why does the brain fall into this trap? Because thinking feels safe. Solving a problem requires action, and action carries risk. If you take a step forward, you might fail. You might face rejection. You might realize the outcome isn't what you hoped for. But as long as you stay in your head, you avoid that risk. The brain confuses the comfort of planning with the courage of doing. Psychologists call this cognitive avoidance. It's when we replace real-world action with endless mental rehearsal. For example, you might spend hours imagining how a difficult conversation will go, adjusting every word, planning for every response. But when the actual conversation happens, it never matches your script, because reality is unpredictable. All that mental rehearsal wasn't solving. It was avoiding. Here's another layer. The brain loves dopamine. Every time you think about possible solutions, your brain gets a tiny hit of satisfaction, as if you've accomplished something. But it's a false reward, like scrolling endlessly on social media. It feels productive, but nothing really changes. This is why overthinking becomes addictive. You're getting little bursts of, "I'm working on it," even though you're stuck. Let's make it concrete with an example. Imagine you want to start a side project, maybe writing a blog or launching a small business. Instead of taking the first step, you spend weeks thinking about the perfect name, the perfect strategy, the perfect timing. Your brain feels busy, but nothing gets built. Months later, the project never started. Thinking replaced doing. Philosophers have warned about this trap for centuries. Seneca, the Stoic, once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Overthinking is exactly that, suffering in the mind by mistaking constant analysis for actual progress. Wisdom tells us, clarity doesn't come from endless thought, but from action. And here's the kicker. Often, the answer you're searching for only appears after you take the first imperfect step. Thinking tries to predict the road ahead, but walking it is what reveals the real path. So, if our brains are wired to confuse thinking with solving, how do we escape this illusion? Philosophy, especially Stoicism, offers one of the oldest and most practical solutions. When it comes to overthinking, few philosophies speak more directly and more powerfully than Stoicism. The Stoics lived over 2,000 years ago, but their insights feel almost tailor-made for the mental struggles we face today. At its core, Stoicism is about one simple idea: separate what you can control from what you cannot. Overthinking happens when we blur that line. We replay conversations we can't change. We worry about futures we can't predict. We analyze outcomes we don't control. The Stoic answer is brutally clear. Stop giving energy to what lies outside your reach and focus fully on what's within it. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." For someone leading an empire full of chaos, that was his anchor. He couldn't control wars, plagues, or betrayal, but he could control his response. That's where peace was found. Applied to overthinking, this philosophy becomes liberating. Imagine you're waiting to hear back from a job interview. Your mind races. Did I answer well? Did they like me? What if I messed up? Hours turn into days of constant replaying. The Stoic perspective slices through the noise. The interview is already done. The outcome isn't yours to command. What's within your control now? Preparing for the next opportunity, practicing your skills, or even simply reclaiming your peace of mind. Everything else is wasted energy. Another Stoic insight is the practice of premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Instead of fearing what might happen, the Stoics deliberately imagined worst-case scenarios. Why? To remind themselves that even the worst was survivable. If you fear rejection, imagine it happening. What then? Life goes on. If you fear failure, picture it. What then? You try again. Overthinking feeds on uncertainty, but Stoicism starves it by shining a light on those fears and showing they're not as terrifying as they seem. Seneca captured this beautifully when he said, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality." Overthinking is exactly that, suffering in advance. The Stoics remind us, reality itself is rarely as bad as the endless scenarios we invent in our heads. But Stoicism isn't about passivity. It doesn't say, do nothing. It says, act where you can, release where you can't. This clarity dismantles the prison of overthinking because you no longer waste effort on what lies beyond your influence. You act decisively where it matters and let go of the rest. Philosophy gives us the lens. But how do we put it into practice? Today, in real life, in the moments when the mental cage closes in. That's where psychology meets action, and where we find the practical steps to finally break free. Philosophy gives us the wisdom. Psychology explains the trap. But when you're stuck in your own head, you need practical tools, things you can actually do in the moment to escape the prison of overthinking. Let's break down a few powerful steps you can start using right now. 1. The 2-minute rule. When you catch yourself stuck in thought, ask, can I take a real action on this in the next 2 minutes? If yes, do it. Send the message. Make the call. Write the note. If no, let it go for now. This simple filter forces your brain to stop circling endlessly and either act or release. 2. Externalize your thoughts. Your head is the worst place to store loops. Thoughts swirl endlessly when they're contained inside. Grab a journal, a notepad, or even your phone. Write down the problem, your fears, your possible outcomes. By putting it on paper, you move it from a noisy mental storm into a clear external list. Often, the act of writing shrinks the problem instantly. 3. Set a worry window. This one comes straight from cognitive behavioral therapy. Instead of fighting overthinking, schedule it. Give yourself a 15-minute worry window each day where you're allowed to overthink. Outside that time, if your brain starts spiraling, you tell it, not now. Save it for later. Over time, your brain learns that it doesn't need to hijack every moment of your life. 4. Practice mindful presence. Overthinking thrives in the past. What did I say? And the future, what if I fail? The cure is to anchor yourself in the present. Try a simple breathing exercise. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4, pause for 4. Focus fully on the breath. It sounds small, but it interrupts the mental loop and grounds you in reality. 5. Use Stoic reframing. When you catch yourself replaying or predicting, stop and ask, is this within my control? If yes, take action. If no, release it. This simple Stoic filter is like a sword that cuts through tangled thoughts. It takes practice, but with time, it becomes second nature. 6. Take imperfect action. Here's the ultimate cure: move. Do something, even if it's small, even if it's imperfect. Overthinking keeps you frozen because it promises that once you think enough, you'll be ready. But clarity rarely comes first. It comes after. By acting, you give your brain new information, and the loop begins to dissolve. Imagine this: your thoughts are like a foggy room. Sitting there, trying to think your way out, only makes the fog thicker. But once you start walking, even slowly, doors appear. The way out reveals itself not by thinking harder, but by moving forward. Breaking free from overthinking isn't about silencing your thoughts forever. It's about learning to live with them, without letting them cage you. With philosophy as your guide, psychology as your map, and practical steps as your tools, you can turn your mind from a prison into a place of freedom. So the next time you feel trapped by endless thoughts, remember, the key has always been in your hands.